Welcome back. Let's head to the United States now, where we are looking at drone footage of the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, showing its impact on Longboat Key. There it is, a small town located in the Gulf of Mexico. Local media say Longboat Key residents received an evacuation order on Wednesday last week. As the storm approached Florida, residents were allowed to return on Sunday. The storm killed at least 90 people in North Carolina, in South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, and Virginia. According to reports on the ground, officials fear that more bodies will be recovered in the coming days. Damage estimates range from $15 billion to more than $100 billion. Insurers and forecasters have been reporting over the weekend. Water systems, communications, and critical transportation routes have been affected in Helene's wake. Let's look at some of the other parts of the U.S. affected by the hurricane. Florida was not the only state. So was North Carolina, as we mentioned earlier. We're also looking at drone footage, the best way to get a proper bird's eye view of the situation on the ground. This was filmed on Sunday, the large-scale destruction in the state. In Asheville, floodwater turned roads into rivers, while debris littered roads and around stores. In Savannah, roads and parts, they were all caked in mud. 30 people died in North Carolina, with nearly all the deaths in Buncombe County, according to Sheriff Quentin Miller. The National Weather Service's Weather Prediction Center reported that some of the worst rains brought Helene into western North Carolina, which saw almost 30 inches fall on Mount Mitchell in Yancey County. Tennessee was also another state that also received the brunt of Hurricane Helene's devastation. Governor Bill Lee surveyed the widespread destruction left by the hurricane using a helicopter. He called the scene heartbreaking and emphasized the immense work needed to recover. Floodwaters swamped neighborhoods and residents across the northeastern part of the state, struggling with power outages and extensive damage. Near Greenville, the Nolichucky Dam was initially feared to be at risk of breaching, but was declared stable and secure by the Tennessee Valley Authority after a thorough review on Saturday. Recovery efforts are ongoing, and officials warn it would take months to rebuild. Now, President Joe Biden did address reporters before boarding Air Force One on Saturday, calling the impact of Helene tragic and noting that FEMA teams are already on the ground in Florida. The U.S. president drew attention to the disparity in damage assessments between local authorities and federal agencies and described the devastation as stunning. He assured that the federal government had deployed significant resources in advance, even beyond what had been requested. Rain and storm surges from Helene snuffed out power for millions of people. It destroyed roads and bridges and caused catastrophic flooding from Florida all the way to Virginia. Well, Vice President Kamala Harris on the campaign trail, energizing a crowd in Las Vegas on Sunday night, focused her speech on the upcoming elections, but also spoke passionately about Helene's devastation, expressing solidarity with affected communities and speaking about relief efforts.
I want to thank the first responders who have done so much. Stand with these communities for as long as it takes to make sure that they are able to recover and rebuild. Earlier today, I received an operational briefing from FEMA Director Criswell. More than 3,300 federal personnel have been mobilized. We are deploying food, water, and generators and working to restore water and power. We are deploying food, water, and generators and working to restore water and power. We are deploying food, water, and generators and working to restore water and power. We are deploying food, water, and generators and working to restore water and power. We are deploying food, water, and generators and working to restore water and power. We are deploying food, water, and generators and working to restore water and power. We are deploying food, water, and generators and working to restore water and power. We are deploying food, water, and generators and working to restore water and power. We are deploying food, water, and generators and working to restore water and power. We are deploying food, water, and generators and working to restore water and power. We are deploying food, water, and generators and working to restore water and power. We are deploying food, water, and generators and working to restore water and power. We are deploying food, water, and generators and working to restore water and power. We are deploying food, water President and I have told state and local leaders we will provide whatever help they need in the days and weeks ahead. Because we here know that this election is about two very different visions for our nation. And the contrast, I think, was quite clear in our debate. Did you all see the debate? And in 2 days, I know we will cheer on Coach Walz when he debates J.D. Vance. Yeah. But listen, also, their debate should not be the last word. I'm trying to debate Donald Trump again, and I think he should debate again. The American people have a right to hear us discuss the issues. And as you say here in Las Vegas, I'm all in. I'm all in.
Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird joins us now. Maria is in transit, but she's graciously responding to our questions. Maria, great to speak with you. We're looking at the damages, the drone videos from Tennessee all the way to Florida. And we know that more states were affected by these floods. I mean, by the storm itself, Hurricane Helene. And just talk to us about how much of a damage it caused across many states in the United States.
Yes, this damage that was caused across the United States was unprecedented. We're talking about a Category 4 storm. This storm was what we did not believe could actually happen, to have this type of landfall of a storm. Many Americans have been dealing with not only flooded homes, but also homes that have been completely demolished. There's obviously a lot of Red Cross efforts that are underway. This storm has been, I'm glad that you're able to actually see me at this time, because this storm has actually impacted all of the eastern seaboard area, the mid-Atlantic region. There has been rain and storms all the way up and down the eastern part of the country for now over a week. We've obviously been dealing with down power lines, even in areas that are not near the hurricane location. But what we know at this time, that they are really trying to ensure safety. There are some communities that were completely covered with water, and the only way someone could get out was by boat. So those boats were secured and individuals were actually brought to safety. Many of them. There probably will be additional rescue efforts underway to be able to ensure that as many people as possible and many lives as possible can be saved.
Yeah, and I said initially you were in transit. That's because we weren't sure exactly where you were, knowing how much of an impact Helen had on the country itself. But great that you can join us via video. How many people do authorities think were affected by the storm?
There were millions of people impacted by the storm. And when you talk about the impact, you're not just talking about those communities directly right there on the ground. You're talking about those surrounding communities that were also impacted. North Carolina had major impacts as a result of the storm. We know that there are areas, even as close into the Washington, D.C. area, that have been impacted by the storm, not to the extent, obviously, of the hurricane in Florida, but have had some impacts. And so this is going to be a time where we're seeing many rescue efforts, even from this area going down to Florida, to ensure that they can assist as much as possible. We know the president is very much aware of what's happened, and the greatest hope at this time is that there can be great recovery efforts done. But we also know that we are in hurricane season, and so this could be something that we see not only just for today and in the next couple of days, but there could be other storms brewing out there.
Yeah, and as you speak about other storms brewing out there, I know that with every year, across many countries, and there is a prediction of what, the weather could bring, how the weather could change in the course of the year. And I know the United States is, usually at the forefront of receiving, these hurricanes and their impacts. A lot of people wanted to stay behind to ride out the storm. Some weren't really sure exactly what sort of impact it would have. Some thought they were protecting their properties by staying back. Is that a decision that many regret now?
I'm sure there are many that regret it, as we know that even though you ride out the storm, there's really nothing someone can do when those winds hit those very high levels. And at that time, you're really just trying to save your own life. And so the property damage is nothing that anyone can do to obviously stop. Now, some of the things that are done oftentimes are being able to board up windows, being able to board up areas to try to decrease the amount of damage, but to totally wipe the damage out and to be able to think that you could save your home, I think, and that's what really government officials were trying to push forward to state. This is not something that you can stop. This is a natural disaster potentially that's headed our way. They did not know it was going to be a Category 4 at the time, but really focusing on life-saving measures was a number one focus, and that's what the government officials have continued to stress. And so we will probably begin to see individuals temporarily relocating, whether it's with family members or also into other areas. And you're going to see other states coming together to ensure they're able to provide some emergency shelter for individuals.
Yes, and I did get a chance to see, I saw some U.S. reports about how much devastation it had caused in Florida. Homes are literally flattened, some, taken out to the sea, unrecoverable. How do people rebuild after this? How do the states affected say how they intend to rebuild after such devastation? Because we'll talk about the structures when you're done talking about this, but really, how do they recover from this?
Well, the rebuilding efforts are going to be something that is going to require federal intervention. So the federal government will have to come in play, and that's where we normally see FEMA. Obviously, this type of devastation is going to create $1 billion or more worth of requirement from federal funding to be able to assist with the rebuilding. So they'll obviously begin with trying to remove things that are unsafe, being able to clear roadways. As you can see, there's some roadways that have been able to reopen as water has receded, but it's still not safe to actually go through some of these roadways as debris and different things have obviously blocked some of the roads as well. So that'll be the first effort. It'll be to begin to remove and to ensure the safety of the communities, and then they will begin to look at the homes and begin to remove the rubble. But we're really talking about a couple of months from now before we're going to begin to see houses being able to be rebuilt. So that's what it's going to require. It's going to require rebuilding. We know with Hurricane Katrina, it took several years to rebuild. So the first effort is going to be able to address what we're seeing. And as you're showing right now, some of these communities that are just flooded, and some of it is only going to take time because the water will have to take time to recede. They oftentimes do have some measures in place to be able to kind of move the water through. But when you're talking about vast flooding, as it is, oftentimes it's kind of a waiting period and really securing people and ensuring their safety first, and then beginning to remove some of the rubble that has been acquired as a result of the storm.
Yeah, I mean, the devastation, there's water everywhere. You can see cars obviously move from where they originally were to other places. Roads are flooded. I really don't know how those rescue teams are getting to people. I think they're using boats. Even for reporters on the ground, it is difficult getting around. But again, as I said, the structure of some of these buildings, especially in Florida, it almost looks like, they were made of wood. And I'm just wondering, when you're expecting natural disasters like this, wouldn't it help to have a more solid structure on the ground, perhaps homes built with bricks and stones?
Yes, and so what we do know is that the structures of these homes, we have not really changed much of how we build homes over the past 100 years. But we know that areas like California, who deal with earthquakes quite often, oftentimes will build their structures so that the home will actually roll a little bit when the earthquake happens. And so when you think about flooding areas, there are some measures that are in place. That's why you typically don't see basements in areas that can flood or hurricane hurricane locations. So those are some measures, but there's a major emphasis on infrastructure, as we know that the president right now is underway with addressing infrastructure, as we've seen bridges collapse and so on and so forth. And so that is, I think, one of the areas that we will begin to see engineers being able to look at how we can rebuild these homes, but to your point, being able to rebuild them in a way that does allow them to be able to sustain a little bit more than they have. And some of this is also going to be a result of obviously some of the newer homes, and you will show some of those homes are sustaining a little bit better. And that's due to the materials that are used. But some of the older homes that have a lot of wood buildings, maybe, brick and mortar buildings have suffered quite a bit because they cannot sustain some of the flooding. And when the water seeps in, it just can totally wipe out the home. So these are all of the things that are actually included within what the president is talking about, the infrastructure bills, to be able to address some of these very real issues, as climate change has had a major impact on our communities and obviously has caused these type of devastating situations and circumstances.
Well, Maria, thanks again for walking us through this aftermath of Hurricane Helene's devastation on states in the United States. You do stay safe as we continue coverage of the aftermath of the hurricane.
Thank you.
We'll move to India now, where thousands of them displaced in Bihar today after record-breaking floods caused widespread devastation across eastern states in India. A power station supplying electricity to about 43,000 villages in the Muzaffarpur district was submerged under floodwaters, according to officials. Many villages lost many of the possessions of the devastating floods, with homes inundated and livestock affected, according to the local authorities. The state government has mounted extensive relief and rescue operations, hiring boats, deploying boat ambulances, and setting up shelters for flood victims across the state. We're also keeping our eyes on Nepal, where over 192 people have died in floods over the weekend. We have pictures, just a snapshot of some of the devastation caused by recent floods in the country, landslides as well as causing the floods, as a result, of the floods. 32 people are still missing in 2 days of incessant rains caused by a low-pressure system in the Bay of Bengal and over areas in India bordering Nepal. Nepal shut schools for 3 days after landslides and the floods triggered by the rains. The authorities are still looking for at least 56 people, the figures going up from the last count. It's not all doom and gloom here on The World Today. Still ahead. A vintage car lover in Egypt turns his passion into a profession. For all the car lovers, stick around for the story. Welcome back. Happening in France, Marine Le Pen, the leading figure of France's far-right National Rally Party, has been on trial today, accused of misappropriating EU funds. She said she was confident she would prove she did nothing wrong. Le Pen, the RN itself, and 24 others, party officials, employees, former lawmakers, and parliamentary assistants are accused of using money destined for work at the European Parliament to pay staff who were working for their party, which at the time was called the National Front. Le Pen and the other accused say they used the money. The use of the money was legitimate, and that the allegations show too narrow a definition of what a parliamentary assistant does. But for Patrick Maisonneuve, the French lawyer representing the European Parliament, documents, email exchanges, in his opinion, show the existence of an organization whose objective was to capture funds from the European Parliament for purposes other than the strict missions of parliamentary assistants. The European Parliament has estimated the damage at 3.5 million euros. Its lawyer, Patrick Maisonneuve, was informing reporters earlier today. And the victory of Austria's far-right Freedom Party in Sunday's general election is both alarming and a chance for a positive surprise, according to commuters in Vienna today, hours after polls closed following what a political analyst called a historic result. Political analyst Thomas Hofer predicted a very complicated phase to form a coalition government, because on the one side, content-wise, it would be logical for the People's Party to team up with the Freedom Party. However, they would have to make a Freedom Party chancellor, and this is certainly something they want to avoid.
This is a historic result. For one reason, the Freedom Party came in first, and this never happened before. But of course, also the second side of it is historic, namely that the two bigger parties, the traditionally bigger parties, the Social Democrats and the People's Party, didn't even get 50% of the votes. They might have a slight majority in parliament. However, this is certainly a defeat for both big parties if you look at the Second Republic. I think what we have to expect is a very complicated phase of the forming of the coalition, simply because on the one side, content-wise, it would be logical for the People's Party to team up with the Freedom Party. However, they would have to make a Freedom Party chancellor, and this.
Japan's incoming Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba says he will call the general election for October 27, following his victory in one of the closest ever leadership races for the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. The news is met with mixed responses on the streets of Tokyo, some of them saying they support the incoming Prime Minister and others hesitant to back the ruling LDP party after a series of scandals, including undocumented political donations that plunged the party's ratings to record lows. And staying in Asia, China's President Xi Jinping has said Taiwan is a sacred territory of China and the separatist activities for Taiwan independence must be resolutely opposed. President Xi made the remarks at a reception in celebrating the 75th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. He said China's reunification with Taiwan is inevitable, and China says it alone exercises sovereignty and jurisdiction over the Taiwan Strait, part of the South China Sea. Both the U.S. and Taiwan say the strait, a major trade route through which about half of global container ships pass, is an international waterway. China's National Day is celebrated annually on October 1st. And more than 30 migrants have been rescued by the Spanish Coast Guard in what appears to be a second crossing in the same day near the Spanish island of El Hierro. The harsh conditions forced rescuers to transfer the migrants from the wooden boats they were sailing to a Coast Guard vessel. The latest rescue comes after two boats carrying at least 77 migrants arrived at La Restinga port. The crossings happened 2 days after a disastrous sinking of a migrant boat that killed at least 9 people and left at least 48 of them missing, including a minor. The accident is considered the deadliest for 30 years in the Spanish archipelago. One man in Egypt is making big bucks turning retro vehicles into cars that you can use today. For those who are worried about what their retro vehicles, which have been run down and just sitting at home, well, he's got a solution. He's ready to pimp your ride. With more than 30 years of experience and being a lover of vintage cars himself, Helene is taking up the challenge at reviving classic cars in his auto repair shop in Egypt.
The love for vintage cars is not just a hobby for this Egyptian man, Helene Ezzat. He's now making money from it as he turns his passion into a full-time profession. He does this by opening a car repair shop for like-minded people who want to fix their beloved classic vehicles. He opened his auto repair shop 3 years ago and has worked in the field of classic cars for more than 30 years. Refurbishing a classic car may take months or even years to complete, depending on what the car needs. Some cars need new parts, while others need original spare parts imported from factories abroad. The most important task for Ezzat is to bring life back to the old cars as they once were in their original state. According to Ezat, such a task requires months of research and planning.
You have
to start studying what a certain car used to look like in its original state, and based on that, you decide whether you will manufacture some parts or order them from abroad, or even renovate and bring life to those parts if this is doable.
So far, he has refurbished nearly 50 cars and hopes that Egypt eases restrictions on the imports of classic cars. A law passed in the year 2020 in Egypt stipulates that people wanting to import classic cars should obtain a special permit from the Ministry of Transportation.
Sounds really nice. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.